I'm so excited for today's episode for a couple of reasons. Reason one is that this will air on the 3-year anniversary of the show. Wild. Thank you so much for tuning in because this show is for you and it has enriched my life so much as I've gotten to make content for you that matters to me and I hope for you too. Next, this topic is really close to home for me because I've been laid off twice and want to help in any way I can. And if you've been laid off too or are concerned you may be laid off, I want to help. Now, I'm going to do 2 parts and therefore 2 episodes for this topic because there are 2 camps of wonderful people here that you might fall into. One is those who've been laid off and I want to most urgently help in any way I can. So I will address you first here, of course. Next, I'll have an episode for those of you in the other camp who aren't currently unemployed, who might be fearful a layoff might be coming to an office near you, or who have friends who you want to support who are going through this. That being said, even if you are in the second camp, to be prepared is to feel less scared, so I recommend watching this one too if you have the time. This episode here today is part 1, most directly addressing those of you who've been laid off and are currently searching for your next great adventure. I feel like a fly just flew into my nose, who knows? And real quick before we get to today's agenda for my new friends here, hi, I'm Julie Bethany and I create content to empower you to live your best, most authentic life as the truest you version of who you are. And I give you the tools and resources to do that here. And I should say, if we're not official friends yet, I'd love to keep hanging out with you. And we can do that if you subscribe to the show here and or come hang out with me where I'm most active, which is on the gram at Julie Bethany, where I share daily empowerment for you in even more bite-sized bits. Okay, today's agenda. We'll talk through first why you shouldn't feel bad about being laid off, then which checklist items you should most basically go through if you're laid off to take care of business. Then we'll talk about 3 ways to maximize your job search and utilize your network, and I'll share exactly how I landed 2 offers in less than a month of being laid off the second time without even having applied to either of those roles. After that, we'll talk about arguably the most important part of all of this, which is how to take good care of yourself and your mental health during a layoff. And finally, I've made some additional tools and resources for you if you are going through a layoff. So I'll quickly run through those so you have all the tools possible to succeed in this season because you will succeed in this season. Okay, let's dive in. First of all, let's talk about why you shouldn't feel bad about being laid off. Now, there's been such a wild stigma around being laid off that just isn't correct or true. I had to remind myself over and over, especially the first time I was laid off, that it's just not your fault. It's the company's fault if you were laid off. For real. That's because they couldn't afford to keep your expensive self because they messed up and you have so much worth that they couldn't pay up. Seriously. So they had to lay you off because they, not you, they messed up and either overhired or underperformed themselves as a company and didn't meet their own financial targets or have new leadership trying to woo investors because, again, they didn't perform well, or some combination of similar factors. And none of those have anything to do with you at all. And I've seen and have personally experienced layoffs due to being one of the highest paid people in your role when they've got to downsize too. It seems backwards, but sometimes you may be the most valuable employee, and that's why they had to let you go. It's totally backwards and wild, but it's certainly not you. And for those of you perfectly well-intentioned friends and family who keep calling it fired, they are sorely mistaken, and it's really damaging. You were not fired. This was not your fault. You were laid off, and the company is to blame, not you. I will yell it from the mountaintops. It's not you, it's them, for real. And the practice of laying people off has also increased drastically over the past few years, especially post-pandemic. Companies have found layoffs an easy out for complicated problems they themselves caused. Fun fact though, actually, I've read articles recently talking about the fact that this is actually false and layoffs end up costing companies more than they saved in the short term laying people off. when they get to the long term due to lowered morale and thus higher likelihood of quote unquote survivors of the layoff not staying around at that company later. Yikes. But also not your problem now. Okay, let's talk about which checklist items you should most basically go through if you're laid off to take care of business. I'm going to give them to you straight here. First, we're not going to freak out, okay? Because we're going to take a deep breath instead. I promise you there are good steps to follow to maximize this time you're in and find a potentially much better role that pays even more than you had before. And even if you don't hold the belief that I do, that you will find what is meant for you and that this is a step to getting obstacles out of the way to clear your path to it, everything that is meant for you, this is the moment to put on your own oxygen mask first. So you are your priority in this moment. Next, once we've, breathed, we're going to read through our separation agreement and ask questions if we have them around any severance payments, any continuation of benefits like health insurance, etc., and take care of that agreement first. And if you have vacation days, P.S., you can likely cash them in depending on where you live. Then, if severance or benefits aren't an option, you can apply for anything you need to through your state like unemployment, healthcare, etc. As a note, COBRA tends to cost an ugly penny, and I say that because paying a lot of money ain't pretty, okay? To continue your former coverage, so I recommend catastrophic coverage instead for emergencies in the interim if you want it. But that being said, I am not a medical or financial expert, disclaimer. So you do you, boo. Now, ultimately, the application process for unemployment is intentionally confusing. You may need to Google how to fill out the application for your unique state just in case, but don't feel bad about the fact that you do. One of my besties was gypped thousands of dollars because her state's process was so intentionally confusing. It's awful. And in terms of healthcare, I don't recommend putting your phone number in any inquiry box. Why? Because they tend to sell your information and your phone will likely be blowing up every 5 minutes for weeks on end. I tell you that from a personal experience and my own mistakes to save you the headache. And if you have a 401k or 403b or any retirement savings accounts or accounts containing your stocks or equity, it's a really good thing to connect with those providers over now to hear about your options of what you can do with them. Also, if you can, I do recommend having them take the taxes out of unemployment payments as you get them, but only if you're in a good place to do that right now, of course. But it will make for a far less kind of like complicated headache tax situation once tax season rolls around next. But if you aren't able to do that now, it's totally okay too. Do what's best for you. Now is the time to look after number one, aka after yourself. Then we're going to make some updates. We're going to update our resume, our LinkedIn, post our open to work banner to all viewers, and make an announcement on LinkedIn that you're looking for your next great opportunity, if you're comfortable doing that, of course. LinkedIn Premium also often offers free trials, fun fact. So I highly recommend taking advantage of that, then taking advantage further of the discounted rate they'll give you if you threaten to cancel premium once your trial's over. It's just business, baby. But it can help with just seeing who viewed your profile, which roles you'd be a good fit for, and where you might be a top applicant too. And it also conveniently shows you who from your former organization who performed the layoffs is still stalking your profile for daily entertainment for you. You're so welcome. Then I do recommend, really highly recommend actually, that we make a spreadsheet or some other way to track the roles we're applying for. This will be helpful when a recruiter reaches out to interview you so you know what on earth they're going to interview you about once you've, quite honestly, maybe been hundreds of applications deep sometimes. If you do get an interview, which you will, I also recommend screenshotting the entire job description just in case it disappears once they're no longer accepting applications as they interview you. This is what I use, for example. I also have a separate spreadsheet to track the interviews with the companies I'm actively interviewing for, which you can do if you feel like it. Next, and this is really helpful, but set a routine for yourself at least on weekdays. They say applying and interviewing for jobs is like a full-time job, and it sort of feels like it is. But you can decide on a routine, like when you wake up, you're going to make breakfast, have a coffee, do a meditation or prayer or reading or journaling sesh or a combination, maybe an exercise class for free online, then apply for at least 10 really good roles, for example, then clear out your inbox for any potential interviews to schedule because people are going to be knocking at your door. Then you get the rest of the day to do whatever you'd like. I say weekdays too because you will likely need a break. Applying can be really exhausting, so I say run your job search like a business and hold to your office hours so you don't burn yourself out. I also advise considering your budget, of course. How much are you going to spend on your needs and wants? Are there any subscriptions you can cancel for now to be resumed once you have a steady paycheck again? Or do you have friends whose subscriptions you can jump on for now? Netflix is totally glaring at me. It's fine. How can you save? And what's your backup plan if severance and/or unemployment isn't going to fully cover your expenses eventually? If you make a plan for yourself now with your future needs in mind, down the road, your future self will thank your current self for considering them. Okay, so you've done the necessary things to take care of yourself. Now, let's talk about ways to maximize your job search and utilize your network. Now, to paint a wild picture for you, the first time I was laid off when everyone and their brother was getting laid off alongside me was no fun. And that meant that my job search lasted for over 6 months due to making it to multiple final rounds of interviews just to be told the companies were suddenly on a hiring freeze and couldn't take me on over and over again. Or they'd have me share my ideas for them and create elaborate presentations that took hours to make just to repost the role, which sucks because have you ever heard of ghost posts? It's when companies aren't actually looking to hire someone but want people to work for them for free by generating ideas for them as candidates that'll never get the role. But don't worry, you can look on Glassdoor to find out not only how current employees at a company like being employed there, but also if the company ever has sketchy interviewing practices before you take on a project like that for them. Now, the second time I was laid off, a lot of us were laid off at the same time, and it was most clearly a hashtag layoff season again. But instead of 6.5 months, I had 2 formal offer letters in my hand in less than a month after I was laid off. And I didn't even have to apply for either of those roles. How, might you ask? No, not magic, though I wish. Harry Potter, we do love him. And yes, we do need to acknowledge that luck was totally a factor here. It was the right place and right time for those roles to even be available for me, yes. And both times I started a new role out of a layoff was within about a month of each other, like in the calendar year, right after the new year, which is a ripe time for companies to start hiring again as budgets roll over. But also, I massively utilized my network this time, posting that I was open to work the literal day after I was laid off with a message on LinkedIn, got one of those companies in my inbox. They came to me. I'd worked with them before and they needed someone with my skill set, so they connected me to the hiring manager immediately. And they were a startup and hadn't even created a JD or a job description for it yet. The other role was a really lucky one where one of my close friends worked there and has seen this role coming from a mile away and thought I'd be a great fit before I was even laid off. I started this role 2.5 months after he first told me about it. And friends, to have a friend like that who sees opportunity even before you need something new, but when you may just want to try something new and is looking out for you even before you need looking out for, that's a massive thing I'm grateful for. So thank you, Corey. And he's a creator too, so definitely take a moment to check out his incredible music from Corey Streets. Now, this was one of those moments, you might say, where preparation meets opportunity, also as my friend Shane would say, and did about these roles. Which leads me to this. Get your references ready. Think about who you've worked with in the past who might be a good person to attest to your fabulousness and your work capabilities and character. I broke my references into 3 categories, and it's totally okay if you don't have people in all of these 3, but as close as you can get is super helpful in my opinion. The incredible people on my reference list were 3 people. I had to pause for a second because the wonderful neighbors above me had a vacuuming sesh. Great for them, keeping clean. The incredible people on my reference list there were 3 wonderful people I'd managed, 2 wonderful people who'd managed me, and 1 wonderful person who'd been my colleague and counterpart. I also had a personal reference on hand just in case too. Now, in my experience, people often call your former managers before they call anyone else. But I've also been a character reference for my childhood best friend, hey Hannah, and I've also given a reference for my former colleague and counterpart, who I could not wait to work with again at the same company after he referred me. And I work there today. And that being said, getting referred to a role in our company is key. If you have a friend who can refer you into their company, it's so much easier to minimally get your foot in the door and potentially your whole self in that door. You automatically skip to the front of the line. And then, yes, you do have to let yourself shine in the interviews and wow them, which of course I know you'll do. But I've been following a ton of recruiters recently on social media as I'd been interviewing, and a lot of them said this was the way to play. As in, the best way to get at least a first interview. Then you do you, boo, and shine and wow them, but you'll be in the door, and that's a great advantage when right now some roles are posted on LinkedIn and within 2 hours have like 1,000 applicants. Wild. And as an added bonus, you can be pretty sure you'll enjoy the company too if you already have a friend or someone whose opinion you value and trust who already enjoys working there. Remember, the company's not just interviewing you, you're also interviewing the company too. We also want to, of course, research the company, their mission and values, and any news they've been in recently. And if you know someone in that company, they can truly be an invaluable resource to let you know what the company's like, what they're looking for in the role you're applying for, and or what the people are like and are looking for that you're interviewing with, for example. Use that network, baby. Next, I'm going to tell you a strategy that didn't work for me last time, but I still recommend. And then I'm going to tell you one that did work for me this time that I hadn't tried before, but I still recommend them both. Now, the thing I did before that it didn't work for me last time, but I still think is a good idea, is to look at where good connections of yours work via LinkedIn and then go to that company's website and see if there are any open roles that fit your capabilities on there. Then apply and LinkedIn message the person you know and let them know you just applied and see if it's possible if they wouldn't mind letting a recruiter at their company know. I only started doing this toward the end of my last job search, so who knows if it would have worked eventually. But that being said, please help open the doors for others too when you're on the other side of this or when you're on the inside, because it's a small thing to do to refer someone to your company if you really think they are great, or just let your company's recruiter know someone you know and have worked with in the past just applied to your company if you think they're a good fit in person, of course. Because also your reputation's totally on the line too. But if someone you know has a good rep and you can help them out, please share the love and do it in the future. And now for the strategy that massively did work and gave me the ability to let a couple companies know I had to remove myself from the running when I'd accepted a new role. Now, I had a very unique and odd specialty. For me, that was co-working. I'd been in co-working for over 6 years, which is wild. And because real estate and office space haven't had the best year per my beloved WeWork's Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, which, Adam Newman wanted to buy them back, and they seem to not be having any of it, but I am so entertained nonetheless. Anyway, I am at this point, as completely bizarre as it sounds, a co-working expert. I do adore it, and I also chose to take a break from it when real estate, is in need of settling itself for a moment here, so I don't keep getting laid off. But you bet I went online and typed co-working in New York and applied for all the roles available that fit my capabilities and salary requirements. And every one of them had me pretty far in interviews by the time I accepted my role. So the strategy is go search for your niche, even if it's weird like co-working is, and then apply for your competitors. If you don't have a non-compete clause, okay? That's a good note too. And finally, find amazing recruiters in your area. I totally did not think of this before somehow, and my friend Jen connected me with her incredible recruiters, and it was amazing. They really do work so well with you and for you. They literally reach out to you with opportunities all the time, and then they submit your resume on your behalf to apply for you. So cool. Shout out to Emily and Caitlin and Jen. And recruiters can help you seek full-time roles or temping roles in the meantime, if you do need it while you wait for that full-time offer to come through. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say about networking and strategy is, again, please be the network for someone else before and when you do find a role. Helping each other is truly the most wonderful thing. I had someone from my last company reach out to me as they were seeking a new role too, and we shared recruiters, offered to be references for one another, sent opportunities each other's way, and it was so nice to be in it with someone who'd gotten laid off at the same time I did. Every time I've been laid off too and gotten a new role, I've also unfortunately had multiple friends who were laid off at the same time. So I made sure that when I reached out to recruiters to pull myself out of the running or turned down an offer when I finally accepted one, I've always had a friend who I would truly recommend who I gave those recruiters as an incredible alternative to use. Of course, reach out to your friend first and make sure it's okay that you share their email and LinkedIn profile with recruiters before you do that. But it's a huge win-win for all. And finally, I know I said that was the last thing, but this one actually is. I have a bestie who has a recruiting company called Case, and she's literally one of the greatest humans ever. So when I was navigating, waiting for, and accepting one of multiple offers, Kayla very kindly got on the phone with me to game plan what the best way to kindly let them down was. Because I'm not here to burn any bridges, just to cross the bridge into my future. So if you have friends in the recruiting industry, they can be an invaluable resource also during this time for you. And she also wrote me an extremely kind LinkedIn recommendation. So that's another good idea to have your references or your colleagues you've worked with in the past do that for you. You can also totally swap writing recommendations for each other, and that's super helpful too. And hey, Case always has some great roles if you're interested and need one. In this season, it's good to take care of yourself and each other if you have friends in the same boat. A rising tide lifts all boats, in the wise words of JFK. Okay, we need to pause for a second because there's some drilling happening above us. That New York City life, am I right? Okay, this leads me to the next part and perhaps the most important part of this whole episode. How can you take good care of yourself in the season if you are laid off? Now, I just had lunch with a friend who was laid off. Both times I was laid off too, wild. And we both shared the sentiment that we were so much calmer and more chill the second time around. Now, once you've been through it, you learn there's sort of nothing to fear but fear itself, and you can always figure it out because you are smart and resourceful, my friend. And we had both tried to make the best of it in the second time around, knowing the absurd amount of time we spent freaking out the first time. So when I was laid off, yes, I set a budget, absolutely. But I also made every Friday a celebratory day that signaled the end of my application and interviewing week by enabling myself to go and pick up a meal of my choice because it costs half of what it does ordering in. I also got coffee out on Sundays. I did that both times I was laid off, but this time I also added enabling myself to get my favorite vegan treat when I got through a tough interview. I didn't do it every interview because it turns out I had up to 5 interviews a day when sometimes 4 of them were in person. Grateful and blessed. But the day I was laid off because I saw it coming and 2 other times after a batch of interviews, I went and got my favorite treat. And no, I'm sadly not vegan, but sometimes dairy just isn't the kindest to me. Raise your hand if you've ever been personally victimized by dairy and ice cream. A lot of us, okay? So I got pressed juicery freezes as big celebrations for myself. The other self-care that's worked really well for me both times I was laid off was scheduling things to look forward to, especially free things, okay? We're balling on a budget here. Not being in a work environment can feel really lonely sometimes, so I would schedule catch-up calls with friends. New Yorkers visit the Met on a donation basis of a penny or more, so I went and did that too. I scheduled a virtual movie night with a friend. I scheduled an in-person girls' night with friends. And I also worked for myself during both times I was laid off and started creating things I enjoyed making. I created the layoff journal the first time I was laid off, and I made it for those of you who want a pal, aka me, to work through the emotional impacts of a layoff, dream again about where you want to go next and if you want to switch it up a bit or not, and start regaining the confidence to go and absolutely crush it out there and score your next gig like I know you can. And it's available on Amazon, which I'll link in the show notes here. And you can learn more about it too if you'd like to take a peek at what's inside at juliebethany.com/the layoff journal. But having a creative endeavor to enjoy and produce something exciting during the time I had, and I know that as I exhausted myself and or went through the motions of applying and interviewing the first half of the day sometimes, that the second half of the quote unquote workday for me was going to be dedicated to me and to my own art and my own productive enjoyment. And that was so helpful. I was producing something, and that was great too to add on my resume and to share in interviews when they were inevitably like, okay, so what did you do during this gap period? Aside from applying and interviewing like a wild child. And if things do get dire, using your friends and family for support is really helpful. And so is calculating the least you can accept to continue supporting yourself and your family if you have one, or your cat in my case. And you can totally start at a company that pays less than you're worth, but will support your survival while you continue to interview for your thrival if needed. That's totally not a word, but you get what I mean, right? Humans are incredible and adapt, and you will adapt in this season. And then you'll be able to help others who are going through it once you've inevitably gone through it yourself. Finally, the resources I have for you are the aforementioned journal I created for you to work through this time and to really feel supported and empowered from someone who intimately understands what you're going through and can walk alongside you. And again, that's called the Layoff Journal, which is available again on Amazon at the link I'll add in the show notes or at juliebethany.com/the layoff journal. And I tried to price it really reasonably. And I also like to share too that in a financially taxing time, like during a layoff, it's nice to have that as a gift. So when your friends ask how they can help, maybe that's the thing they can do for you. Next, I also have an older episode on this topic that talks fully about the emotional impacts of layoffs. And that's episode 28, which I'll also link in the show notes. Sorry if you can hear drilling still. All my other resources for you are also at juliebethany.com, and I hope you'll take a moment to see what would best support you there. Okay, we did it. I just want to leave you today saying that you are not alone. What you're experiencing is a big deal. It's a loss, and you are likely grieving that loss. You lost something, namely your job, and that takes time and emotional effort and support. Being laid off is also listed as 7th among the most stressful life experiences a person can have. And for those of us who've been laid off multiple times now, which is becoming more and more common, unfortunately, it's never fun, but I can promise you're not alone. And it's not your fault. Remember that sometimes it's because you're the most valuable and experienced employee, and that's why you cost the most and had to go first, which is awful. And I hope you know too that there are roles out there that will pay you more, that there are companies that will create a far more flexible and less toxic working environment for you than the one you left. And there just may be some wonderful fate-related things that come about due to this experience. And no matter what, you will always be stronger and wiser after an experience like this. And I would love to stand alongside you and support you in that, because I know it's not easy, but you will come out on the other side of this as the person you're meant to be after having the experiences you were meant to have. And I'd love to continue to support you, and we can hang out where I'm most active, which is on the gram at Julie Bethany, or through this show where new content will continue to roll out for you. And this episode will have a part 2 coming soon that addresses what to do if you feel like you may be laid off. And I still recommend checking it out if you want to prepare even more for the future. But I promise you that being laid off once gives you like a sixth sense when layoffs are coming again. So maybe that episode is more for helping you understand what the signs were that a layoff is coming, so you can then spot them even more easily the next time it could be a possibility, which I hope, though, it never impacts you again. Okay, I hope you go today and start to live the life of your dreams as the best, most authentic, truest to you version of yourself you can be. Because when you do that, you show others it's possible for them too. And even in the hard times like right now, you can still make the most of what you've been given and give it your all to empower yourself to enjoy this one precious life you've been given to the fullest, because you deserve that gift that only you can give yourself. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I can't wait to see you soon. Bye for now. You've got this.
You say hello? Hello. Okay.
And here we have Kippen, per usual. Can you say hello?
Hello?
Oh, she's so sleepy. She's over it. She's like, I'm not doing it today. You say hi? Yes. Licking her lips because she knows there's treats coming. Okay, bye, friends.
Thank you, baby.
If you or a loved one were recently laid off, this is for you. When I was laid off, I had no idea the massive emotional impact it was going to have on me. And I really wish there was a guide that talked more about that and helped me work through that, unlike so many of the resources I was finding that were only discussing the financial impact or how to set up your resume. I had wished for something in that moment that really acknowledged the deep emotional impact layoffs have on someone and helped me work through it. So I created it. The Layoff Journal is my heart and soul poured into something that is specifically meant for anyone going through a layoff. I infused my own stories and research in there to comfort anyone in that position, and also have prompts and frameworks that help you move through how you're feeling, how you redefine what's true, help you re-engage with your life, and really set in motion the next phase of your life and release what once was in order to receive all of the amazing things that are meant for you next, and to help you know you're not alone. Take a look. I hope it really helps.